Welcome back to Chapter Day. Happy Tuesday. Today we are going to be reading Esther chapter 2. Yesterday we read about Esther. We didn't touch on Esther just yet, but we got the introduction of where they are in the time of King Ahasuerus. This is happening in the palace of Shushan, same place where we encountered Nehemiah at the beginning. And we see mention of the queen at that time, which was Vashti or Vashti. And we are not sure if she was the only queen or what, but she was commanded of the king during one of his parties with his friends in his courts while they were drunken to come before him to parade herself, and she refused. And his officers thought they ought to put a stop to that female rebellion before it got around to all the other kingdoms, that Vashti had refused the king's request. So they advised the king get rid of Vashti. Now, I would say this, in all of this doing, we can wait as we read and listen carefully as to how God formulates a plan. Sometimes in our own lives, we feel things aren't going fast enough, or something we've asked for is not forthcoming, or whatever the case may be. But God is working out a plan, and I'm saying this for me personally too. God is working out a plan that we can't see in the background, and because other things involving other people need to be put in place before we get whatever it is we request. Some things we can just get like that. Other times there's a process, and God is a very orderly God, because there are other people praying too, and God works his plans out to make sure everybody is exactly catered to according to their needs. Isn't that amazing? That's a God of organization. Okay, chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hej, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Shushan the palace there was a certain Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Okay, so now we are going to be coming down into the introduction of the queen that will be, because we know that the other queen is no longer. So now the king has suggested to get a lot of young, beautiful virgins. They always want the best to come before them to, it's almost like a beauty contest. And we are going to read as to, well, now we are getting the introduction of Mordecai, whose name was listed among the officials, the high officials of those captives that returned to Judah or Jerusalem to help rebuild. So now we are hearing his name Mordecai. I am believing it is the same Mordecai, because that same palace Shushan, the same king and everything, is being mentioned also. So Mordecai is the son of, or the great grandson of Kish, who was the father of Saul. So he came from the line of Saul. So he's a Benjamite. Verse 6. Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. So he was one of the captives that was carried away from Jerusalem. Verse 7. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. So this is his cousin. For she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, who Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. Okay, so your uncle's daughter is your cousin, yeah? So he's bringing up his cousin because her parents had died. Okay. So now we get introduced to Esther, whose Jewish name, I believe, was Hadassah. I love that name. I've only known one person to name their daughter Hadassah so far. Verse 8. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. So remember, the king only wants the most beautiful, the young women, and the virgins. Verse 9. And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him. And he speedily gave her her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens, which were meet to be given her, out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. So she has found favor with the chief of the palace, who is taking care of all the maidens. So, and I tell you, God can give you favor. I'm saying this over and over again. Sometimes we will end up in favor of people who we never would have considered to even have any sort of communication with. But in this case, in the king's palace, God has a plan. God has a plan. You know, a lot of times we get so riled up, here, riled up about things. This is not happening, or this is happening. Why did that happen? How come God allowed that to happen? God has a plan. If we would just trust, this is God we are dealing with. Okay. So she has all her things for purification. So I guess once you have to go before the king, because you're going to become the king's bride. So you have to purify yourself. Okay? Verse 10. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. So her uncle or cousin Mordecai had told her, don't tell them you're a Jew. Okay? You just go there and you do the whatever they ask you to do, but do not reveal that you are a Jew. Verse 11. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Now when every maid's turn was come to go into King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months, according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purifications accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Whoa, you need a whole year to purify yourself before you can go before an earthly human king. And we have the privilege of going before God in our sin-ridden states, as filthy as can be. They mentioned and made mention of Joshua in rags and filth, and Satan waiting to claim him because that's the representation of his sinfulness. And we are allowed to go before God, and God is saying to Satan, no, my blood was spilled for him, and he is free. He is good. You let him go. That's what God does for us. This is a symbol. This whole story of Esther is a symbolism of our sin-sick state before God. And Satan is the one waiting to eradicate us. And God is standing up for us. Purification for an entire year to go before a man. And we have the privilege in our filthiness, and sometimes it is physical filthiness, that we find ourselves in some gutters and we cry out to God, and God says, come unto me, all those who need rest and rescue, and he rescues us in our filthiness. Tell me about it. Verse 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. So after the year of the purification, they came before the king, and they were given whatever it is they wanted out of the king's house. Okay, verse 14. And in the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned into the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, that she were called by name. Okay. So I guess after your full year of purification, then you went before the king, and then you were ushered into another house. And if the king really didn't find too much favor in you, you won't ever called again. Maybe that was the last of it for you and the king. Okay, so let's see what happens. Verse 15. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing. But when Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed, but what Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. So she didn't ask for anything more. She just went with whatever they gave her. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. Something tells me she was not as fully adorned as the rest of the women there. Something tells me she was more adorned with a contrite spirit. Anyway, verse 16. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. You see that? She didn't ask for all kinds of gold chains and extra apparel and a veil across here and a ring stretching from there to there. I have seen some countries where the women prepare for brides, for marriage, if you call it, and they are adorned. You cannot find a place that you cannot put an ornament on their bodies from there. The crown of their heads to the soles of their feet, and I mean literally, and I'm not exaggerating. They have painted, they have drawn, they have written, they have board, they have stuck, they have dressed, fully covered. But God gave Esther favor. She found favor. She didn't ask for anything extra. She just went in with what they gave her, and the king found favor with her and put the crown on her head. She became queen instead of Vashti. Verse 18. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. So I would say that she was an obedient daughter. It was not his biological daughter, but he brought her up and she was obedient to what he said. I know today, and I know I was a rebellious young person too. I didn't always listen to what my parents said, but I did to some extent. I know I wanted to try certain things for myself and, just have a good time unprescribed by what they considered a good time. And, I like most teenagers, you would have a friction, but there were certain things that it stuck here. And maybe it was fair. My mom, especially. My dad was not a punishing person. He was not a disciplinarian. But my mom, yeah, she kept a tight rein. And maybe that's why I held out on certain principles. Should have held out longer. But anyway, verse 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, hmm, it was found out. Therefore, they were both hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So apparently, while Mordecai, Esther's uncle, sits out at the gate, he may have heard some or overheard some talk between two of the king's guards that something didn't please them with the king. The king did something that displeased them and they were planning to kill the king. So Mordecai went and he told it to Esther, who related to the king on behalf of Mordecai. And it was inquired into and found to be true. And they hanged those two guards. So we're going to see where all of this is leading to in our next chapters. That's the end of Esther chapter 2. I like this book. It's like a story. And it's not a long, drawn out story. It comes to the point and you can find some spiritual implications in there. Lots of it. Lots of it. So that's our reading for today. Thank you all again for listening. And until our next reading, remember, faith comes by hearing God's word. Take care. Bye.